Welcome to episode VSL of So Many Insane Plays. Oh, what a match, Steve. I obviously, you and I had talked about White Eldrazi, and you were interested in it for a while now. So I was not very surprised to see you play it. A little surprised, but not very surprised. And that match was really interesting. In hindsight, I realized you got it all done with just the big Eldrazi.
Yeah.
There wasn't a single Thalia in that match.
It is,
which is weird.
Yeah, you and I have been talking since December, and I decided I was going to play White Eldrazi in the VSL play-in on December 14th. So well over a month ago, primarily because I thought that the deck that was best straddled to attack the paradoxical decks and the mentor decks was White Eldrazi. And usually, the way at least I designed the deck is I'm all in on the Thalia effects. I debated whether to run Glow Rider over Bryn Wingbear, but I ultimately settled on Bring because I like the evasion.
Okay.
But I kept a game one hand that really, depending on what you could have played, could have been awful.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that you were going to play a mentor deck, but I wasn't sure whether you would play either the paradoxical mentor deck we played at Vintage Chance or the Mr. Grimoire deck you played in the last batch, or something else entirely. So if you were playing paradoxical mentor, I'd probably just get crushed. So,
yeah.
And I mean, it's hard to know exactly what was going on your side of the board. I know I was sweating bullets, but the one of the plays that I made that I'll just share with you now is I was holding a Cavern in game 2 for a number of turns because obviously there are a lot of different things to name and a lot of mana needs. Like I might be a Pegasus or a human or Eldrazi. The only reason I played it when I did, and I named human, was because I was holding Mental Misstep. I sideboarded Mental Missteps as technology against Mentor because they pay multiple mana to remove a creature, and if you misstep the plow, it's a blowout. And so I played that, and then the next 2 turns I drew Eldrazi Displacer, which I could not cast.
Interesting. So. Okay. That's okay. I wondered about that. I also wondered if I'd stranded any Reality Smashers in your hand or not, but it turns out I guess not.
I probably wasn't as surprised by Meddling Mage as the audience because you've long had a penchant for Meddling Mage.
Yeah, like that card.
Talk about Meddling Mage, though, what you were thinking in terms of including that.
Well, I just like Meddling Mage as anti-tech, basically. So, for example, against Andy's red-white Eldrazi deck from last week, I can proactively play Meddling Mage and name Sulfur Elemental. Or against his deck from this week, for example, I could name Dread of Night. It's just it's ideally it's in game 3, right? Because a lot of the decks where you bring it in, like your deck, for example, I take the probes out, so I'm mostly guessing. And sure enough, against you, I had no idea what sideboard technology you had, so to speak. And I just named Reality Smasher because it was the thing that I was most afraid of at that particular point. But it's just a preemptive measure, a way that you can get around things, especially things you can't answer with Split Second, Sudden Shock, Sulfur Elemental, that kind of thing. And it's a kind of a catch-all too. If I'm not prepared in any other way for some crazy thing, I can try and Meddling Mage it. So
you just straight blue-white? I didn't see any other colors.
Yeah, big fan of blue-white right now for reasons that you and I have covered in many different ways. But Fragmentize is, feels really good. Which reminds me that your turn of Thought-Knot Seer into Chalice for 1 was pretty brutal. I thought the Thought-Knot Seer was not going to be so bad because my hand was really soft. And when you're clearly deliberated on my hand because it was so bad, right? Well, which of those cards is the least bad?
Exactly. I was trying to think, well, the Hercules can generate you a token. It could also scoop up the Mana Crypt, which I really didn't want you to do. Snapcaster had nothing to do, but it's nothing it could recur, but it still is power on the table. So I wasn't sure. But.
Well, when you took the Hercules, I kind of pumped my fist and thought, yes, now all I have to do is pull Plow off the top. And I get to pull both these creatures. Play Chalice for 1, and I thought, okay, this is how this is going to go. Well, it's my opinion. I lost most of my last half dozen matches in tournament Magic to Chalice at 1.
This is going to be, I think, one of the most exciting matches. I mean, the two matches so far have been really exciting. I mean, I really enjoyed our match, and
Yep.
I thought Andy's match was super interesting.
Definitely.
Before we get to Reid's match here, I just want to point out that that I was watching the end of Andy's match, and it's just so brutal that he made the and the chat was debating, is whether he made the right play. And obviously, when you see the pyroblast in hand, the time walk just looks really tragic. Dreaded Knight would have been great there, but it reminded me of the crazy game I had against Caleb last week, where there was no way I could have fathomed that he had 3 triple mental misstep and 2 props. Playing Doomsday, and I could have easily defeated that. If I just
if you just known.
Yeah, if I just known. So it's like, but anyway, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where, I feel really bad for Andy because he's going to get, probably some flack on that. But it's just one of those things where I think you got to give the player a little bit more credit, because as an audience, when you have perfect knowledge, it's obvious, but in the it's a lot less obvious when you're actually in the moment. And I think some people in the chat pointed out, like Diafan Ryan Eberhardt said, he actually thought that Andy's play was not necessarily clearly wrong. So,
well, and looking over Caleb's deck in hindsight, Caleb has 3 mental missteps and 1 pyroblast. I understand that 2 pyroblast post sideboard. So the count favors mental misstep, which is the point I was making with Randy at the time. But I would have to go back and look. Obviously, Andy doesn't know the two numbers, right? But I think history would tell us that there are more missteps than pyroblasts. Yeah, in post sideboard. But Caleb had spent at least 1, I think, misstep earlier in that game. So in hindsight, with perfect information of deck lists, it might have actually been a 50-50 call at that particular juncture. But Andy didn't have all that information. I think he made a perfectly good choice.
It's one that will be debated for some time, but that's the pitfalls of VSL is you have perfect information, except when you're playing. My match last week demonstrated that, I think, probably perfectly. Well, let's get going. We're really excited for this match. So
yeah, let's take a look at Caleb and Reid. All right. I think I have to admit that I was rooting for Reid to play Paradoxical Storm, and I bet a lot of people were. So this is pretty exciting. Now, what do you think of Reid's opening hand, Steve? This is an interesting one. He's on the draw.
I would keep it. You got active Mox Opal online.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a pro. You've got a bounce spell. I would keep it. What do you think?
I would keep it. I think so. Between the card draw from you're on the draw, +1 from the probe, plus the preordain, you have to be able to find at least 2 business spells in those 4 cards, and otherwise your mana is pretty explosive. So it's speculative, but I think the odds favor him drawing good cards. That's not so good, but it does help him keep Chromox online if he wants to crack LED.
The good news. Yeah, the good news for Reid in this situation is that Caleb does not have a mental misstep. So he's going to probe and then preordain. So he's going to have some good card selection here. I mean, there's any number of cards here that he could just go off. I mean, honestly, he at a minimum, force Caleb to force, right?
Yeah.
We'll see here. I think it's interesting how well does Gitaxian Probe allow you to actually play around your opponent's hands?
Mm-hmm.
A force of will is still a force of will. One way or the other, you have to address it. And usually the way you address it, at least in a deck like this, is you actually have to throw something good into it. So you have to accumulate enough good things, which at this point he doesn't really have anything that Caleb would seriously considering force, I don't think. Do you?
No. So sadly, Reid has whiffed on his first 2 out of those 4 card looks. There's a good chance that there's at least 1 business in this preordain, but he really needs 2. If he finds that second one, though, he could be off to the races. His mana is fantastic. I don't think there's any card he could draw right now that would let him win this turn, but
Well, the one card that would be getting you close is something like Mind's Desire, but he needs double blue. He only has one blue here, and he doesn't have another way to generate it.
Yep, LED will not help you
could,
there.
If he could put it like a Desire on top, then he could just blow it next turn.
Certainly feasible. And he won't expect main deck Mindbreak Trap from Caleb. Main deck Flusterstorm is a consideration. Okay, this counts. This counts as business. Caleb will be stymied a little bit on how he addresses this, I think, because I expect Reid to play Sol Ring Opal.
He has to. That's one of the drawbacks of the Opal, is that it forces you to expend a lot of your Storm.
Yeah.
Just to use it. I don't blame Reid for going for it here. It's going to force Caleb to trade the Force, but it does incur a cost.
Mm-hmm. What do you pitch if you're Caleb? Gush or Dak?
Well, at this point, I think Dak is the most insane card. I would pitch Gush. actually, I would probably pick definitely Gush.
I agree.
Because if you draw a Mox here, you've got Dak, and then you can start stealing his mana. He didn't draw a Mox.
And Caleb knows 2/3 of Reid's hand still. The only card that's a mystery to Caleb is that Emerald. Brainstorm into a misstep plus fetch is pretty nice.
Oh, that's really nice. I mean, he's gonna get fetch, shuffle, and ponder.
And then
that's
ponder,
as good as it gets.
I was thinking that the best outcome for this turn was, as you said, a Mox, but then ponder into Flusterstorm would have been nice. But
yeah, Flusterstorm actually don't think does very much because the Lions that I'm in can pay for it.
That's a fair point. In this particular scenario, there'd be very little cost for Reid to pay for it. Turns out,
as good as Flusterstorm is, it's really just not that good against. It's not really effective in a surprising number of situations against these paradoxical decks.
Turns out Caleb
he drew the Mox at the end of the sequence instead of the beginning.
That's the worst. Caleb has 0 Flusterstorm in his 75. He's relying on Mindbreak Trap, 2 of which are in the main. I guess
if Reid finds paradoxical outcome here, he's off the braces.
Yeah.
Except I'm sorry, I forgot he had the misstep.
Right.
Caleb had misstep.
But Reid could pull it off the top in any one of the next few turns, I think, and
now he's going to start picking off the mana base. The question is, which of these things is Dak Faden going to take?
You have to take Sol Ring.
Exactly. I was going to say that. There is a case to be made for
the Opal.
I would say the Ruby, because the Ruby is actually a source that you can use, perhaps more broadly. The Opal is one I would leave because with 4 Opals, there's a better chance that he'll draw a useless Opal at this point. Now, Caleb doesn't know that it wouldn't be useless because he had the Emerald. Wow. Caleb's Ancestral here and Stony Silence. This game's over.
Caleb still has a land drop, right? This is turn 3 Gush. He'll go
he drew Gush
into Stony Silence.
He drew Gush for the turn, which was just perfect.
Well,
and he can actually time walk here and then Stony Silence.
He knows 2/3 of Reid's hand still. He knows Lion's Eye Diamond and Chain of Vapors, so he knows that Reid still has a quote-unquote answer to the Stony Silence.
So this is where all the complications come into play, right? I mean, he wants to hold a second blue spell to have Force, right?
Right.
So he decided to go this route instead of the Stony Silence. I think I would have been more inclined just to get the Stony Silence down because you've got to give a lot of respect to a deck that can just win in a heartbeat, you know.
I agree. I think this line was inherently risky for Caleb.
I mean,
because that Mox Emerald is a mystery card.
Here's a sequence where Reid could go up. What if Reid draws Mind's Desire, right? He could chain 2 things and generate like 5 Storm in Desire. Right. The Stony Silence is the only card that stops that, not Force of Will. And if you're going to play Dak, I definitely would have picked one of those things. That is,
Defense Grid is a good draw because it's symmetrical. Dak can't interact with it.
Yeah, but it it makes Dak's ability even stronger, right? You're sucking out his mana and giving it to you. So taking the Sol Ring,
That's your point.
Definitely not how I would have sequenced it, but at this point, I think the cards that Caleb has are so strong. I'm not sure that the particularities of the sequence actually matter that much.
You're probably right. The only risk here is if Caleb somehow can't find a threatening win condition fast enough. But the odds of that seem very slim with active Dak plus Gush.
If he just plays Stony Silence and protects it, it doesn't really matter, honestly.
Right.
But that moots the argument.
So, just so we're clear, you would still play Stony Silence and not Mentor here, right?
I think it's a close question, but I probably would play Stony Silence, yeah.
Yeah. I think I would as well. I think that shores up the most weaknesses. You know that Reid's going to play end step Chain of Vapor.
Well, at this point, it's going to be end of the first main, or no, just end step. Yeah, he wants to float anyway.
He properly floats either way. Because Reid knows that Caleb knows half of his hand, so Reid needs to threaten something else just out of proper sequencing.
You actually do the chain there, because if you wait to chain on your turn, it's at the cost of a blue mana. But you can start by chaining your own stuff. You know what I'm saying? So you could tap the sea, like chain, whatever, like a Mox, and sacrifice the sea, then bounce it to the Stony Silence. Wow, that's
Reid drew the wrong storm card for this game.
Hold on a second. If he had done that route that I just said, he might, and for whatever. So here's the thing, right? If you throw Chain of Vapor on the stack, targeting your own permanent, there's a possibility, however slight, that Caleb just might have let it resolve because he doesn't know precisely how Chain of Vapor works. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So if he had, I guess he needed one more black mana source. But if that works, and if this point, you're trying to exploit small windows, then he could generate a lethal tendrils. So I think that's all. It all enters to the point of you hold on to the chain. At this point, that's really bad.
Well, it invites the chain though, right? Because now Reid can do what you said. He can bounce one of his own permanents and sacrifice the land that's being wastelanded in response. So he gets a tiny bit of value. It won't resolve, of course, but still.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Let's see if Caleb forces this.
Well, he'll misstep, right?
Oh, I didn't see that. It's hidden behind the... Okay. It's hidden behind the Skype video.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's not going to pan out for Reid, but I think he's making the right decisions all along. Probe will show him the bad news. Yep, there it is.
Force of will.
He's not quite dead yet, though, so Reid being Reid says, all right, show me. Caleb actually has lethal here if he's willing to commit his whole hand to it, I think. Because he has 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, no, I'm mistaken. He needs one more spell. Sorry. He can only generate 3 spells with this hand.
That's 9 plus 5. That's 14 damage. Yeah,
yep.
One short. Yeah, we need a formula like Psychotog for Mentor and Mox. What was the Psychotog formula again? It was X.
In terms of translating cards in your hand into damage, you mean?
In graveyard, yeah. What was it? X equals the number of cards in your hand, Y number of cards in your graveyard. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's 1.5 times the cards in your hand plus cards in graveyard over 2.
We need a formula for Mentor.
Well, Reid wasn't technically dead there, but he sees the writing on the wall. There was nothing he could draw to get out of that.
I'll look at Reid's sideboard. He's got 4 Monastery Mentors and Blightsteel Colossus.
Sure enough. So he has a slight bit of transformation into Paradoxical Mentor. Curious whether or not he'll employ it here, though.
Yeah, he's not pulled the trigger. He's sideboarding out Tinker and Jar.
Mm-hmm. Keeping the Colossus, of course, on the board. Boarding out some undesirable artifacts in case Stony Silence resolves.
Does our Paradoxical Mentor deck have any artifact accelerants that Reid doesn't have? I think the main difference is we have Sensei's Divining Tops, whereas he has Grim Monoliths. I'm just trying to get a feel for, what kind of critical mass of artifacts he's going to need in order to combo out, because he did sideboard out one.
He does have quite a few more than ours did. The Grim, the Chrome, and the LED. Interesting to see. I'm interesting to see Reid has Chain of Vapor still sitting in his side.
He just put it there, I thought. That was one of the first things he did, but that is puzzling to me. Isn't that his only visible answer to Stony Silence, right?
Right. When I played our list, I put Tinker Colossus in the board specifically as a response to Stony Silence and Null Rod. So I find it interesting. I can't see what Reid has off to the far right. He has one copy of Fragmentize that I can see. And I'm with you. I would either be bringing in Chain of Vapor or Mentors or Colossus, but not none. So
I also would think that if you're going to have the Fragmentize, wouldn't you want the Tundra in the sideboard over, like, let's say, he took out Basic Island, I guess, over the Tropical Island? The Tundra allows you to cast Fragmentize.
No, he doesn't have a trop. He's got Vault.
Oh, sorry, that's a Flooded Strand. It's
Tundra,
very small.
Yes, and then the rest are fetches and Academy.
Okay.
So I guess he believes that he can't go any lower on black sources.
Just the reliability in terms of the time.
Yes.
I understand that. You need 2 Cs for that.
Right. It's interesting. It could be that his plan against Stony Silence differs from the play versus the draw, which I would completely understand. But in that case, I would expect. Oh, he just made a change at the last second. I thought.
I didn't see
Fragmentize and then it committed. I don't know what happened. I was saying that I think Chain is better than Fragmentize on the play because you can be proactive with it.
Here's the other thing. If he resolves, the problem with Fragmentize is you can't respond to Stony Silence with Fragmentize.
Right.
Like you can with Chain. The problem, which means that you really need, in order to cast the Fragmentize, the white mana on the board, like the Tundra. So I think that would create a premium in terms of, really needing, that, for example, Chain over the Fragmentize if you're not going to bring the Tundra in. But I don't know exactly what his mana, what he's thinking in terms of
I would agree with you in theory. Reid is 1 mana or delve away from turn 1 Treasure Cruise here, which is comical but unhelpful.
Caleb's got the perfect kind of archetypal, paradigmatic gush flowchart hand. He's got the Force, the Misstep, the turn 1 cantrip, and he needs to find another land so he can set up turn 3 gush. But he's got turn 2 Vern's Prodigy. Pretty bonkers.
Assuming he finds another land, that's exactly the kind of hand I kept against you and didn't find the other land. And the whole thing fell apart based on exactly that.
You didn't have a preordain.
I did. I pondered.
You pondered.
I pondered and saw Cavern of Souls, which didn't cast the plows in my hand. So I shuffled and then never found the requisite land. This game is playing out in a very similar fashion in the sense that Soul Ring is getting misstepped.
But here Reid anticipated that and has the Fluster Storm.
Right.
So is that going to help him? Is he going to get any closer now to being able to play this Treasure Cruise?
No, because it takes a mana and gives a mana, so it doesn't mean he doesn't have Cruise online on turn 1. He has it on turn 2.
If he gets a fetch land, he'll have it next turn.
Well, he'll have it on next turn either way, because his mana, his artifacts produce
6, 7, 8. Right, You're right. Of course, he has to protect it, which he's far from being able to do. Now,
Caleb finds Preordain and Ponder now.
Yeah, I love debates over which cantrip you play. Like if you have a hand on turn 1 and you have Preordain, Ponder, or Brainstorm, which do you play?
Right. I'm a fan of preordain right there because I want to dig further and not see the same cards. Especially given Caleb's hand, he's got Time Walk, Force, and Gush. He's expecting to go several cards deep in his deck. He doesn't want to ponder and then redraw cards. Yeah.
Well, Reid has a tough choice, right? He has to decide: do I try and fire off this treasure cruise, and given the probability that your may or may not have Force, Caleb may or may not have Force, or do I just hold up the Force?
Right.
I like his play because if he draws one blue spell, he can protect it from Force, right?
And if Caleb just goes Mentor here, Reid's Force of Will is a fine response.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Stony Silence, naturally.
Even better.
And in fact, that's a really good point right there, is that Stony Silence, wow, spending it on this Ponder is a bit surprising.
Incredibly aggressive.
Especially if Caleb were to just go Tundra Stony Silence.
This is going to work out very badly for Reid, because now Caleb can Time Walk. Wow. Okay, I was going to say Time Walk Gush, but that works too.
Well, he can double Time Walk next turn now through JVP. So Reid's got one card in hand.
Ooh!
Well, that was pretty spicy, but he can't play them both.
No, he cannot.
So he's got all the requisite mana. His mana's great for this spell right now, but it's not going to help.
Nope. The good news is that Caleb is going to lose a good card in the process.
Yeah, I'm wondering, if you're Caleb, do you pitch Walk or Gush here? I'm not sure which is more valuable in this particular scenario.
I mean, Time Walk recurring it with Jace is really nutty, but honestly, I would pitch Time Walk.
Yeah, I think Gush provides you more value in this context.
Gush gets you an additional land drop. You're going to turn on. You have plenty of targets for the Jace, right? I mean, you can play Ponder.
You have multiple cantrips.
Yeah, I think it just gets you further. You're looking for like Mentor or Stony Silence.
Right. That's a good point too. If Stony Silence will straight up win you this game, then Gush is the superior card to keep because it sees more cards than Time Walk will.
Yeah, I don't like that. I mean, the ideal scenario is he would have been able to do both, because he would have been able to last turn Time Walk and Gush, and then he would have had plenty of blue spells to do whatever he wanted. Mm-hmm. But I think he put himself in a little bit of a crimp by sequencing Jace Vryn's Prodigy first. I didn't like that. Well,
Wasteland is a nice addition to his situation.
But here's the problem: he has to find another counterspell, right?
That's true.
And Gush plus a big cantrip, I think, gives you a better probability of doing that than Time Walk.
Yep, I agree.
Now, he still may draw very well out of this. I mean, if he finds like a DAC, or there's a lot of draws he can find, like Stony Silence. But I just think,
well.
Now, interesting. If he plays a Stony Silence in your read, do you activate the Lotus Petal just to get Delve?
It seems like the correct proactive play. It's just like a Time Walk for you working toward that cruise. So yes, I think you're right. And Reid does. I don't know if I would have noticed that.
Wow. Interesting. If he had gone my sequence of Time Walk Gush, he would have drawn the Stony Silence and played it the turn before. So Reid would never have been able to play the paradoxical outcome. So Caleb would still have had that force. You see what I'm saying?
I agree. And Caleb just needed to find something proactive to do, and that Treasure Cruise off the top was one of the best draws. He cruises, leaving the two best cantrips, finds all the cantrips in the world. Caleb, seeing this cruise, is going to explain a few things about how the game is unfurled to this point, and it also gives him just excellent information to navigate the rest. Yeah, this match, Reid just lacked that turn 1 explosive play, turn 2 explosive play kind of opener that are the bread and butter of this deck.
Yeah, we haven't seen a draw 7.
Right.
He never opened with a paradoxical outcome. In fact, he opened with his slowest draw spells, the delve spells.
Which they're a support role in this deck, not a primary path.
Yeah, he would have been better off with like Winds of Change.
Winds of Change.
Or any kind of, Tolarian winds.
This isn't old school.
Yeah, I think it's at this point virtually. I don't think there's any chance Reid has of winning.
Reid could have drawn Probe into fetch land that turn and resolved Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, Reid needs to be able to do something that's totally uncounterable, like Mind's Desire. But Caleb has Mindbreak Trap at this point.
Right.
There's no way to shield even his like extreme outs.
I'm very surprised to see Caleb considering Dig Through Time there. Okay.
He's playing Pyroblast on Mox Emerald.
Right.
Not something you see very often, but
classic.
Just so folks know, Pyroblast has one critical functional difference from Red Elemental Blast. Red Element, both are modal. Red Elemental Blast targets blue spell or blue permanent. The difference is that Pyroblast counters it or destroys it only if the permanent or spell is blue. So you can actually target any permanent unless it has Shroud with Pyroblast. And here we go, fire off Gush.
Caleb's dig for Gush Ancestral was pretty spicy.
9 damage this turn. You can probe, that's...
Each of these spells is only adding 2 damage. He's going to have to get an exceedingly narrow set of draws here in order to actually win this turn.
Well, he could Mindbreak Trap himself. No, is Mindbreak Trap only opponents?
It's only opponent, yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so Caleb won't be lethal this turn, but I don't think that really matters. He's got 11 damage. Okay, now he's got 13 damage, which will leave Reid at 6, which means Caleb will require no spells next turn. Brainstorm. Well, good showing, Reid, but it wasn't in the cards this time. Still, no one is out of it yet.
No, we'll get to enjoy watching Reid play next week. There's a good chance you'll face him, I suppose.
That's right. I mean, I have to win. I could be the one person who gets relegated completely this week. Sad though it might be. I just need to win a match. So Caleb advances to meet the winner of you and Rachel, which will happen next week.
Next week, not right now.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I meant that Caleb and the winner of you and Rachel will happen next week.
Got it.
But you and Rachel happens right now. So we've got that to look forward to. Rachel's one and hopefully only for her sake match this night. Let's see. Can she? Oh yeah, she will only play this match tonight because the next match we have is the first of the losers bracket. So this will be Rachel and your last appearance tonight. And there it is. Match 1 of the losers bracket, which will be the only one we see this evening. I get to square off against Reid right now.
Oh, cool.
Which will be fun.
You mean after my match with Rachel?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I keep saying things in the wrong time. You're right. I say right now because it feels next for me. But actually next, we have that match for you and Rachel. So best of luck, Steve. Keep up your winning ways.
We'll see. All right. See you on the flip side.
All right. Thanks.